Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
So some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. My guest for this episode is a writer of comics, a screenwriter, a director, and author of children's books and crime thrillers for adults. It's Barry Hutchison, also known as J.D. Kirk. Hello, Barry. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming on. There's you've had quite a prolific career, not just within publishing, but within just very different disciplines of writing. So let's just start with the what is an obvious place to start. Your most recent publication, the 17th installment of the DCI Logan series, which you put out under the pen name J.D. Kirk, In Service of Death, came out in July this year. How good is your elevator pitch for the series?
Oh, it's terrible. Like the one thing I'm really bad at is ever selling myself in any way whatsoever. And it's really bad when you go into any sort of meetings. I was doing some screenwriting meetings before, and it was like, hit me with your pitch, and I was like, and just sort of choked on my own voice.
Okay, well, tell us a bit about the series.
The series is about DCI Jack Logan, who is a detective chief inspector from Glasgow, who in the first book, A Litter of Bones, is sort of seconded to the Highlands, where there's a case that bears a striking similarity to one that he investigated 10 years previously. It was going to be a one-off. I wrote this crime novel, put it out, and it started massively outselling everything else I've ever written, like 100 to 1. And I thought, well, I'm going to write some more of these. And so he has remained in the Highlands ever since. There's now actually the 18th book actually came out in October. So your information is now out of date. They called A Dead Man Walking, which is sort of a Halloween special almost. It's kind of got Agatha Christie vibes to it, that one. So it's a bit different to the rest of the series. And some people love that, and some people are very angry that, that it's different to the rest of the series. So 18 books. So the first one came out in 2019. So I've been churning.
Wow.
Quantity over quality. That's my motto. 18 of those, 4 Bob Hoon spin-offs and 1 D.I. Heather Filson spin-off, the second of which is coming out in January. So I've written 24 of them, 24 books in that universe since May 2019 when the first one came out.
Do they cross over the characters?
Yeah, lightly. Yeah, you don't have to read, don't have to read all the Logan books to read the Hoon books, or vice versa. Yeah. The characters pop up, but there's nothing that sort of spoils the plots of either one. So you will enjoy them more if you've read the other series, but you can enjoy them almost as much reading them as standalone.
18 books in a series is amazing. I'm trying to think of any others. I guess within crime, and this would be procedural crime as well. Mm-hmm. I guess that's not so uncommon. But do you see the DCI Logan stuff going on sort of indefinitely?
Yeah, well, I mean, I know what the next 2 are at least. So I know up to book 20. And we've just done a deal because the DCI Logan stuff is published through my own publishing imprint. I was published by HarperCollins and Penguin Random House and various publishers for about 10, 12 years. And then as a little sort of experiment, I fell into self-publishing a book in 2016, and that started out selling all my traditionally published stuff. And I've been more or less, despite the protests from some of my publishers, I've been more or less just doing my own self-published stuff ever since. But we've just done a deal for print rights with a UK publisher who are doing a big hardback launch for book 20 and all kinds of fancy stuff. Because it's the 20th book. It's also the 5th anniversary of the first book coming out. We're making a bit of a sort of 2024 is going to be a big year for DCI Logan.
Amazing. Wait, so that's 4 books a year you're putting out?
Well, more than that, because there's also the
Hoon book.
six other books I've written in that time as well.
What's the sort of average length of these books?
About 90,000 words. They're about 80,000, 90,000 words. I've always written quickly. That's been because when I was writing for publishers, when I was writing for, it was children's publishers I was writing for, and I'd be doing my own stuff. And they don't pay very much when you're writing for children's publishers, unless you are J.K. Rowling or David Walliams or someone who manages to kind of hit it really big. If you're like a working children's publisher, or children's author, I should say, you don't get paid that much. So I would always be looking for work because I knew I could pay my bills the following month, but I never knew I could pay my bills 2 months down the line. And that continued for like 10 years. So I'd always be looking for new work. So publishers would come to me knowing that I would produce, decent books to a short deadline. So they might come and say, right, we've got this book, the Ben 10 cartoon series, for example. They said, we want to adapt these into books and we need like 10 books written for 3 months from now. And I would go, okay, I'll do that. But at the same time, I'd be writing a non-fiction book for a different publisher, and I'd be writing my own work for a different publisher under my own name and all kinds of stuff. So I'd always be juggling stuff. I'd be working on 3 or 4 projects at the same time. Sometimes at that point, I was doing like 16-hour days writing. So this is actually kind of a slowed down, sedate pace for compared to what I was used to back then. And I'm doing it all myself, so I don't have sales and marketing teams to try and persuade that this is a good idea, or try and dissuade from putting a unicorn in it because they've decided that unicorns are really big that week and they want to have a unicorn. So it seems quick to people, but it's not really. I'm sitting down, I'm writing 3,000-4,000 words a day, and I'm done by 12 o'clock, by lunchtime, and that's quite a nice, sedate, relaxed pace.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a pretty good schedule going. You say you do it all by yourself, and that this is sort of indie published off your own publishing kind of company. But I'm going to guess, do you also work with like an independent editor and kind of other people?
Yeah. When I started out, the reason I fell into self-publishing was I was asked to go into a school and talk about how kids could publish their own books. And I had no idea how they could publish their own books. As far as I knew, you just, you wrote a book and you emailed it to a publisher in London, and then sometime later a book appeared in the world. And that was my entire understanding of the publishing process. But they were offering to pay me money to go in and spend a week teaching these teenagers how to publish their own work. So I thought, well, I'll try and learn it. And I wrote a book, a comedy science fiction novel called Space Team in 2016. And I put that out on Kindle, designed the cover myself because I knew kids don't, they can't pay a cover designer. I edited it myself because kids can't pay an editor. And the point was to do it all for free. And I did that. And then I went away on holiday. And 2 weeks later, when I came back, it was outselling all my other books combined. And I thought, right, I'm going to do more of these. And I wrote 12 of those in the following 3 years. Yeah. But now I'm kind of going back to just being an author again. That's my journey, is going back that direction of, I was doing it all myself for a while, and now I employ cover designers, I employ editors, I have say a PR team, we've got sales and marketing people, we've got an agent selling foreign rights and film rights and all that stuff. So we're now like a fully fledged publisher who at the moment just publishes my books, but starting next year we're publishing some other authors as well.
Oh, wow. So you are literally becoming an indie publisher.
Yes.
Wow, that's so exciting. I'm wondering, so obviously it was sort of a kind of experiment when you first started doing the self-publishing stuff. How did you, because the biggest thing that I know about indie publishing, the kind of the most daunting thing is marketing the whole thing yourself. How did you kind of go about that at the beginning?
I mean, everyone always says that, but, with 140 books or 180 books with children's publishers, very few of them ever got any marketing. And most traditional publishing has its marketing strategy seems to be like publish 100 books, watch very carefully to see which ones start selling well on its own, and then chuck all the marketing money at that book and let the rest die a death and blame it on the author, which sounds quite bitter, but that's my experience of it, is that they like to put all the money behind what already looks like a winning horse. So, I mean, I was unfortunate enough to be published by HarperCollins, to have a book coming out the same day as David Walliams, his children's books. And, they rebranded all their social media, they rebranded their website, and they had, posters all over the UK, and he was on the One Show and he was on everything. And they didn't even tweet about my book coming out on the same day, So I was doing my own marketing anyway, as I would say 95% of authors are. They always assume they're going to get some, there's a marketing team that's going to come in and it's going to be posters everywhere. And it very, very rarely works out like that. So I was doing my own marketing, but when you're doing your own marketing for a traditionally published book, you have no idea what is effective. So I could go on and do like a blog tour, say. So I'm writing blog posts for 10 different blogs, and every day a new post is going up and there's a review and all that stuff. And I don't know if that's doing anything, because I have to wait 6 months until I get a royalty statement. And that royalty statement only tells me how many books were sold during that 6-month period. It doesn't tell me any more granular detail than that. Now, when I'm doing it myself, if I did a blog tour, say, I could literally look at my sales dashboard and say, okay, that blog went up and I sold 30 books in the 2 hours following it. So I can see a direct correlation between things I'm doing as marketing and results I'm getting. So it's much easier to market when you're indie published, because you can actually see the results straight away rather than have to just either not see them or try and guess how effective something is.
Yeah. So you have more control over the fact that it's like you kind of say, okay, I did like 3 blogs or 3 podcasts, and I can see an uptick on one of them and like a downtick on that. Maybe I'll slow down on that and do more on that.
Absolutely, that's it. Yeah, I could go on. I mean, that's why I know that Twitter doesn't sell books. I've tried many things on Twitter and literally can watch nothing happening on my sales dashboard as a result. So I know that Twitter doesn't sell books. Now, if I didn't have that, direct information, I might be on Twitter all day, every day, thinking this might be why I'm selling some books. If I'm looking at just the traditional published royalty statement after 6 months, I go, okay, I sold, 3,000 books in that 6 months. Maybe Twitter sold all those books, so I better keep tweeting all the time. Whereas that's not the truth. I can see the immediate results. If that's not the case, I'm not going to tweet very much. So it's much easier to market. You're going to be doing it your own marketing, whether you're traditionally published or whether you're self-published.
Yeah,
most authors are, certainly. So you might as well have all the information to hand. Now, would you answer your question? What I did at the start, I did nothing whatsoever at the start. I didn't market anything until the 3rd book was out, because I knew that if I was to spend any money, it's very difficult to make money back on one book. You're selling a book at $2.99 on Kindle. You haven't got much sort of leeway in that. You're making 70%, so you're making £2.10. So if your marketing costs more than £2.10 a copy, you're losing money. But if you have 3 books in a series and someone buys book 1, there's a chance they'll buy book 2 and book 3 as well. So now you've potentially got, for that, if you spend £2.11 marketing that book, you've potentially got £9 worth of sales because you've got those other 2 books in the series as well. So but I didn't advertise at all until the 3rd book was out. And then I started dabbling with Facebook. But I still don't. I mean, I spend very little on advertising. My main thing has been building a community around the books, which is kind of mailing list, newsletter. I give away a lot of weird, random things. I've never written like a kind of a new book to give away or a short story necessarily. I've done a couple of short stories for the Space Team stuff, but for the J.D. Kirk crime fiction, I give away like a photo gallery of locations. And there's a character who gets married in one of the books, and one of the subplots is another character trying to write their wedding speech. And at the end of that book, if you join my mailing list, you get the wedding speech, kind of handwritten with notes and all that stuff that I did. And it took me a couple hours to do, but that has brought me in 10,000 subscribers, to my mailing list. And then it's just about kind of making them feel part of it all. Like I love writing to my mailing list newsletter because it's just an opportunity to sort of vent about weird things that have happened in my life, and it's just a chatty, informal thing. And I know when I put out a newsletter, I'll get 500 emails back that day from people who just want to chat, and I will reply to as many of them as I can and direct them to like the Facebook group and the Facebook page, where it's much easier to sort of have a conversation. And so for me, it's been about growing a community rather than selling. I hate selling myself particularly. When I used to do a lot of school events and talk in schools, and the publishers were like, right, yeah, so you need to go in there and really push the books. The books are for sale. And I just couldn't do that. I couldn't. So I would just sort of go and do this like stand-up comedy routine for kids, and then occasionally like glance over at the books that were for sale in the hope they might take the hint.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. And it's it sounds like kind of coming up with those innovative things. That's actually like having the wedding speech with notes and things like that. That's actually kind of like, that's fun for you, and it's fun for
absolutely. Well, I
people
mean,
as well.
like authors certainly should be creative people.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the stuff I've done, you know, there's a character who's not very well liked in the series. He's a sort of senior crime officer, and he's deliberately a horrible character, but he thinks he's very funny. And I wrote this little scene where he attempts stand-up comedy. There's an open spot at a stand-up comedy night, and dies a death on stage. And it's only, 1,500 words, but it was great fun to write. And my newsletter subscribers, my VIP club, as I call them, loved it. It was so things like that, which are, you can't really do necessarily with traditional publishing. If I went to one of my publishers, HarperCollins or whatever, and said, right, I want to do this random scene that we're going to just give away, it would have to go through so many layers of, editor and sales and marketing team, and it would go to different meetings and all that. So it slows everything down, and you just don't bother doing it. So being able to do it yourself, I can just go, right, I'm going to do this. So for example, the next thing I'm giving away to my mailing list, there's a character in my series called Bob Hoon. I know he has his own spin-off series, and he has a sister called Roberta. So in Scotland, there is every 2 years, there's this alternating kind of DC Thompson produced this comic book, and one's called Oor Wullie, which you might have heard of, and one's called The Broons. And The Broons is this sort of Scottish family, and it's black and white strip. And the stories are broadly similar, and there's a misunderstanding of some kind, and it has a funny ending. And I thought it would be fun to do the Hoons and do like a comic strip page that is in the style of the Broons, but featuring Bob Hoon and his sister Roberta. And so that I looked for an artist to find that, and I actually found an artist who drew the Broons for 16 years. So he's now drawing that. I've written the script. So it took me 10 minutes. It took me 10 minutes to write the script, because I used to write for the Beano and various other comics. So it took me 10 minutes to write the script. I sent it to him. I'm paying him not very much money to do the artwork, and it'll be a fun thing to give away in the run up to Christmas to my readers. And it was a fun thing to write, just a new way of kind of exploring those characters.
It's not something I thought about before, because whilst you were saying it, like, oh, you can give away these tidbits, these kind of notes and scraps and things like that, I'm just thinking like, yeah, that's so applicable to so many different stories. And like, I read a lot of fantasy, and with a lot of fantasy authors, what they'll do is they'll have the kind of the main books, and then they'll write novellas, which will be a sort of backstory of a side character, which they're obviously interested in.
Yeah.
But they have to go through their publisher, and like that has to be an official thing, and it has to be a certain length to be a novella. It can't just be like a 2,000 word kind of like fun anecdote. Whereas with what you're doing, it could just be that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think readers enjoy that more almost, because it is like a fun little thing that they're part of. It's not available anywhere else. It's only available to those guys.
Yeah.
And it just makes them gives them more of a sense of ownership of the characters and the series, because they're seeing these little behind the scenes things. So yeah, and I love it. It keeps me entertained as well, because
I was going to say,
I'd love to do that. It's just fun to do.
Yeah.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Do you think you'll ever go back? Because am I right in thinking you're only doing sort of adult fiction now? You're not doing any children's stuff?
Yeah, not doing any children's stuff. Although I did, after many years of trying, I did get the rights back to a couple of my children's books from HarperCollins, which we will publish ourselves. But yeah, I never really see myself going back to certainly children's publishing. I don't see myself going back to one of the old school traditional publishers. I have had offers for the DCI Logan stuff, and it's been so creatively fulfilling to do it myself.
Yeah.
And financially rewarding compared to what I was being paid as a traditionally published author that I could never justify doing it. I am working with kind of partnering up with Bookouture, who are like a digital first publisher, on 2 books which are not part of the DCI Logan series. It was, or not in that universe. I had this idea for these sort of 2 connected books, and I just wasn't quite sure what to do with them. And Bookouture came along and said, well, we could kind of team up and do them. So doing that, but I could never see myself just going back to being author writing for publisher again.
Yeah. And Bookouture is quite a different thing. I've had a number of Bookouture authors on, and it's a very different, it's not traditional publishing.
Not at all, no. They really have this kind of indie mindset. It's basically what we're doing with our publishing company next year is that sort of indie author mindset to publish other authors. And so it should be fun to team up with them. They have a very good team. One of the reasons I did it is that they do massive business in the US, and most of my sales are UK. I would say it's 70% of my sales are UK. So part of it was just business strategy of going, well, how can I most effectively expand sales into the US without doing all the work myself? So this came along at just the right time.
Okay, perfect.
And I think that's what I love about the indie publishing thing, is it gives you the freedom to do that. I can go, well, I'm going to team up with them for this, or I'm going to, I myself and a couple of other authors are putting together like a joint sort of Patreon thing where we share behind the scenes things going on. And it just gives you the freedom to kind of take control of not just your writing, but your business side of it as well.
Yeah, and you can really be creative beyond the writing itself. You can be creative with your marketing and things like that, and just
absolutely, that's it. And I think nobody cares about your book as much as you do. It would be that thing that you would send it to a publisher, and the invariably, because I say I wrote 180 odd books for publishers, and they would always say, right, deadline is this date, it needs to be done on this date, and I would I'd sometimes work through the night to get the book to them that date, and I would send it in, and I would always get an out of office saying, I'm back in the office in 10 days. Yeah. And it's like, well, why have I almost killed myself trying to get this book done, and you're off on holiday? So when I'm doing it myself, I have complete control, for better or worse. You have to take, if it does go terribly wrong, if I write a book that completely dies, then it's my doing, it's no one else's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. I'd love to talk about, you also do, amongst all of this, you also have done quite a lot of screenwriting.
Yes.
I saw that you did a comedy back in 2013, starring Phil Jupitus, and you've written a few things since then.
Yeah.
Have you always been screenwriting, or is that something that you got into sort of after you'd been published with Harper with those initial books?
No, I actually started off as a screenwriter. I had my first screenplay optioned when I was 17.
Oh, wow.
I wrote this screenplay called Curse of the Bog Women, and it was a comedy horror set in the Highlands. And 17, no idea what to do with it. It was all formatted wrong. But Francis Ford Coppola had a website called zoetrope.com, which was kind of an extension of his production company. And it was for screenwriters to post their scripts, and then other writers could go on and review them. And then they would get, if they reviewed 3, then their script would be eligible to be reviewed by other screenwriters, and kind of put a script on there. One of the people that was kind of assigned it to read was an American independent producer in New York, and he got in touch and said, I'd like to produce this. And I went, all right. He optioned it. And at that point, it seemed, 17-year-old living in the Highlands, still in school, optioned it for what seemed at the time like an obscene amount of money, but now as a grown up, it's not. It wasn't that much, but at the time it was like, and it was getting paid in dollars, which felt like so exotic as well. I had to go to my little high street bank in the Highlands with a check for like $10,000 and say, what do I do with this? And they were like, well, we don't really know. And then at that point I put it in and it was like, it's going to take 7 weeks to clear. I was just like, this is madness. But so that kind of option went on for a few years. When I was about 19, 20 thereabouts, I another production company based in Newcastle had read the script somehow and said, we really like your writing. We don't really do horror. Do you have like a thriller available? Have you done a thriller? And I went, oh yeah, I've done that. I'll get it to you. I'm just going to polish it up over the next couple of days and I'll send it to you at the end of the week. And I had absolutely I didn't have a script. I didn't even have an idea for a script, but I sat down and over 3 days I wrote a black comedy thriller set in Glasgow called Making a Killing. And that company optioned that as well at that point. Both companies subsequently went bankrupt, and the films never happened. But the thought was there, so that was nice. So I've been interested in writing scripts kind of first and foremost, really. But and the reason I got into books is I had all these ideas for things, but it's like I know how convincing someone to spend £30 million on producing a film is not easy. Whereas, convincing a publisher to spend a few £1,000s publishing a book is easier. Yeah. So I thought I'll try writing books, and that's what kind of took off. But I've always been in the background, kind of writing screenplay stuff, and the comedy series you're talking about, Bottom Knocker Street. It's a children's comedy series. Absolutely bizarre how it came about. There was a kids show for kind of preschool kids called The Bops, and it was Keith Bop and Stan Bop, and Stan was Stan Cullymore from the House Martins, and they just sort of dressed up a bit weird and sang some songs, and it was like this little short 10-minute things between programs. Right. And my daughter at the time, she was about 2 or 3 thereabouts, and was obsessed with it, like loved it. Every time they come on, she was glued to it. And I was subjected to it all the time. And I tweeted saying there's something a bit disturbing about the Bops, especially Keith. And Keith Bop replied to me on Twitter and said, "You're absolutely right." And I felt really bad because I thought, oh no, I've realised that he's a real person. He's not. Yeah. So I kind of replied saying, "My daughter loves you," and blah, blah, blah. And we got chatting, and he had a 13-year-old son, and I ended up sending him a pile of books for his son. And then Keith and Stan, they made a little video for my daughter and sang a song and put her name in it and all that stuff. And it was all lovely. And then he mentioned that he was producing this show, Bottom Knocker Street, with Phil Jupitus. It was kind of a kid's comedy, a bit sort of Beano sensibilities, and said, if you want to try out for writing an episode, you can do a sample script.
Oh, wow.
So I went, all right. And I wrote a sample script, and then I ended up writing 32 episodes, I think, of the 52-part series.
Whoa.
So that worked out quite nicely. And I went down and was, meet with Phil, and I was there when they were filming and all that stuff. But it was it was an eye-opening thing, because I'd kind of thought, I can write a couple of these. And then it was like, right, we need 30 of them. Well, I think it was 15 initially, and then I was like, all right, okay. And then they just said, just keep going, and ended up doing 32 of them. But it all just came from me kind of going on and slagging him off on Twitter.
Those were the days.
I might go and say some uncomplimentary things about Tom Cruise next and see if I can land the next Mission Impossible.
That's how it's done. Are you thinking about, or have you written any kind of screenplay adaptations for any of the J.D. Kirk stuff?
No, we're in conversations about it with some production companies and things, and I'm not sure if I would do it myself or not. I think there's sort of a plausible deniability if it's terrible, if I haven't written the scripts. If I can go, well, the books are great, but the scripts, the TV show was terrible because the writer just didn't get it, and then I can still sort of I can deflect the criticism that way. But if I, and if it's great, I can say, well, it's the books, it was the underlying material that was why it's so good. But if it's terrible and I've written it, then there's nowhere to hide really from that,
Yeah, true.
So I think I'd be the conversations we're having kind of sees me in more of an executive producer role. So still quite hands-on in terms of guiding it, but not actually writing all the scripts.
Yeah, I do think also with those adaptations, a lot of the time, even if like you are someone that writes screenplays, as the author, you're often like sort of too close to it in a different medium to translate
very much
it.
so. Yeah, it's difficult. Though we're actually, I've been contracted to write 3 screenplays for something else, which I can't reveal yet, but it's not something I ever saw myself doing. I will say that. But yeah, most of my career really I've just lucked into. I wrote the Beano for a few years, not all of it, but I wrote the strips for the Beano comic for a few years, which was like a childhood dream. And the way I got that was I basically emailed the Beano and said, "Can I write for the Beano?" And they said no. And then I said, like, "Go on." And they went, "Well, you can try writing a sample script for, one of the characters." So I did that. And then they says, "Right, we're going to use this and we'll pay you for this. And then do you want to keep doing this character?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." So did that. And then randomly, and this connects to the TV writing bit as well, randomly there was a kids cartoon series called Adventure Time, which my son loved and I loved. And I wrote the A to Z guide to Adventure Time for, I don't know what publisher it was, but for some publisher I wrote that. And there was an Adventure Time comic, and I went into a shop and I was too tight to even buy the comic, but I opened the comic and found the editor's details, and I emailed the editor and said, "I'd like to write for this comic." And he said, "Yeah, okay." And I wrote a bit, but then the comic got cancelled before my stuff was published, which was heartbreaking. But then the same editor says, "Right, we're doing this 6-issue miniseries called Supermansion, which is based on the American animated TV series of the same name. Are you aware of it?" And I just went onto like YouTube and immediately Google, search for Supermansion and found as much as I could, and then replied and says, "Oh yeah, I'm a big fan. I know it well." So they said, "Right, okay, you can do this comic." So I wrote this 6-issue comic miniseries thing. And then, but the producers of the show had final approval. So Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad was one of the producers, and Zeb Wells, the creator, who's like a massive Marvel writer and does all kinds of stuff, the Spider-Man and all sorts of things. And he was sort of the creator. So he read the comics and says, "Do you want to write for the show?" And I went, "Yeah, all right." So basically I've just lucked into everything over the years.
Wow, what an incredible journey.
Yeah.
But
I will say that Adventure Time comic got axed just before my stuff was on, and Supermansion got axed just after my stuff was on. And those two companies went bankrupt after buying my script. So I'm not saying I'm a jinx necessarily, but there may be some evidence that points that way.
Yeah. But I would say, you do need to get lucky with a lot of these things, especially in these kinds of industries. But you also, you create opportunities to be lucky. The more you put yourself out there, the more opportunity there is for you to.
That's absolutely, yeah. It is about putting yourself out there. And I think that's it. I spent years, so between the ages of about 21 and 30, I wrote a load of stuff and never did anything with it. Like I didn't send it anywhere.
Yeah.
And the first thing I sent anywhere was there was a competition being run by an Edinburgh-based literary agent. And the competition was, you sent in your manuscript, they would read the first 10 pages, and if you were one of 10 winners, they would read the whole book and they would give you detailed feedback on how to improve the book so that it had a better chance of being picked up or getting representation or whatever. So I said, I'd written this children's horror book, and I thought I'll send it to them for this competition and I'll see what happens. And after about a month, they phoned me up and said, "Would like to take you out of the competition." And I thought that meant that they hated it that much that they were actually contacting me personally to say, "You're out." But they said, would like to represent this. Do you have an agent? And I says, "No, And they said, well, do you want us to represent it? And I went, yeah, go on then. And then they took it to HarperCollins, and HarperCollins came back and said, can you write 6 books? And I went, yep. And they said, right, can you give us the outline for the next 5 by 2:00 this afternoon? Because we have an acquisition meeting about it. And I thought this was all just normal. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So I sat down and wrote, an outline, quite a short outline, like kind of 2-3 paragraphs for 5 books, which hadn't existed that morning.
Yeah.
And then they came back and said, yeah, we'll take all 6. So it was dead easy.
Wow.
But I will say, because that makes it sound like it is, but after that, I had far more rejection after that, because they come up with loads of ideas going like, I want to do that. And they would go, no, that's not going to sell. No one's going to buy that. That's terrible. So I had more rejection after the fact of having that book picked up. And I will also say that I spent that 10-year gap, that sort of 21 to 30, writing all the time. I was constantly writing stuff. I was writing novels, I was writing scripts, I was writing short stories. So I was always practicing. And that was the first thing that I felt, that seeing that competition coincided with the first thing that I felt critically stood up to being looked at by someone who wasn't an immediate family member.
Well, that's amazing. What an awesome journey and career you've had so far. And that brings us to the end of the episode, the final question of the episode, which, as always, is, Barry, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book would you want it to be?
It's such a difficult question. I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to say it would be Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, great choice.
Which was one of the first adult books I read, and I use air quotes around that because it's very
adult
very
in quotes.
And it just transferred. I'd say it was the first book that turned me into like a fanatic reader. And prior to that, I'd read lots of comics, and I did read, my librarian got me into reading more books than comics, but I was a big comic book reader, and then read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I would say that book probably changed the trajectory of my life, in that I became I was never seen without a book in my hand after that, I don't think.
Yeah, or a towel, I hope.
Yes, or a towel, yeah. I always had one of those close to hand.
Amazing. One of my favorite books of all time, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Such a great choice, I would say. Well, thank you so much, Barry, for coming on the podcast and sharing all of your amazing adventures and stories and everything that you're up to, everything that's like going to happen with you becoming kind of an indie publisher. That's very, very cool. I'm very excited to see how that turns out. It's been awesome chatting with you.
Thank you very much. Nice to speak to you.
And for anyone wanting to keep up with what Barry is doing, you can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at jdkirkbooks, or you can find his website, www.jdkirk.com. To make sure you don't miss an episode of this podcast, follow along on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. You can support the show on Patreon, and for more bookish chat, check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again to Barry, and thanks to everyone listening. We'll catch you in the next episode.
You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.